you have a circumstance in your life that seems to take all of your attention? It seems to take all of your focus of what's going on right now. See, we have a tendency, maybe even a propensity or a bent, to allow circumstances to take all of our focus. We're going to look at a story today about Jesus and his disciples. And we're going to be looking at Mark chapter 8. Mark scared me there for a minute. This is the second time he's almost done this. I thought he was going to preach for me, and I'm going, God, what am I going to do if he does the message first? I guess you guys get to listen to it twice. So we're going to look at Mark chapter 8. We're going to start at verse 14. We're going to read verses 14 through 21. It says, "But the disciples had forgotten to bring any food. They had only one loaf of bread with them in the boat. And as they were crossing the lake, Jesus warned them, 'Watch out! Beware of the yeast of the Pharisees and of Herod.' At this they began to argue with each other because they hadn't brought any bread. Jesus knew what they were saying, so he said, 'Why are you arguing about having no bread? Don't you know or understand even yet? Are your hearts too hard to take it in? You have eyes, can't you see? You have ears, can't you hear? Don't you remember anything at all? When I fed the 5,000 with 5 loaves of bread, how many baskets of leftovers did you pick up?' 12, they said. And when I fed the 4,000 with 7 loaves, how many large baskets of leftovers did you pick up?' 7, they said. 'Don't you understand yet?' he asked. You see, we're looking at this. Jesus had just performed another great miracle. He had just fed 4,000 people, as the scripture says, with 7 loaves of bread and a few small fish. Afterward, he got in the boat with the disciples and they went across the lake. So at this point, they're on the other side. The disciples are with Jesus, and they're now beginning to act like children. They're over there, and one disciple says, 'Well, I have a loaf of bread. What are we going to eat? What are we going to do?' And so I have this mental picture I would like to convey to you. They forgot to bring bread. They had this circumstance, and they're acting like children. 'Well, I have 1 loaf, but I didn't know I had to feed everybody else. It was your turn to do it.' 'Nuh-uh, it wasn't my turn. I did it last time. It was his turn.' 'Well, I did it 2 times before that. It's not my turn. It has to be somebody else's turn.' And so the disciples begin to focus on the circumstance and the situation that they have that has presented itself to them at that moment. And they have done, can you imagine sitting there, listening to them? They've allowed this circumstance of wondering where food would come from at that moment, after Jesus just fed 4,000 people with 7 loaves and a few fish. They're wondering where food is going to come from, and they take their focus and they put it on their circumstance. They got stuck in the same cycle that we get stuck in sometimes. See, we get stuck in this cycle. We get stuck in this cycle of destruction. I know that might be kind of a harsh word, but it takes a hold of us, and it destroys our inner peace. And this cycle of destruction starts with focus. If I can put the letters in the right order. Focus of our circumstance. The disciples are focused on the fact that they don't know what they're going to eat. Right? So they get focused on this circumstance. And so whether we see it or not in the scripture, they begin to worry about the outcome. See, they're focused on not having any food, and they're beginning to worry about what's going to happen. We don't have any food. Are we going to starve? Are we going to have to stay out here all day? Are we going to have to eat plants? Are we going to have to try to fish? What is going to happen? What's supposed to happen here? And all this worry and these thoughts in their mind begin to cause anxiety and fear. And you know what? In their case, they were arguing with one another and possibly anger. They were mad at one another because, well, it was your turn. No, it was your turn. No, I did it last time. They begin to turn on one another because they're focusing on the circumstance at hand. And so they begin to argue, and they get all this fear. What are we going to do? And oh my goodness, I can't help but think about it. And they continue thinking about and focusing on their current circumstance. As you can see, there are no branches off in this cycle. They begin to focus on their circumstance, which causes them to worry about what the outcome is going to be, which then creates the anxiety, fear, and anger. And it's a continuous cycle. The same cycle that we get stuck in today from time to time. We have something that happens in our life, and we focus on what happens. And the more we think about it, and the more we worry about it, and the more fear we have about it, and the more anxiety we have about it, the more focus it takes away from everything else. And we begin to pay so much attention to this that it becomes like an auger. It becomes like an auger, and it will just continue to drill in a downward motion until we get so low we have no idea how we got there. And it doesn't happen like that. It happens over time with the continuous focus on our circumstance. And see, Jesus gave the answer in the scripture we looked at. He said, don't you have eyes? Can't you see? Don't you have ears? Can't you hear? Do you not yet understand? See, they came from a situation where they didn't know what they were going to eat, and there was 4,000 people, and Jesus provided. It took a miracle for him to provide, but Jesus provided for them. And the final verse that I read says, do you not yet understand? Today, I believe that I'll use myself as an example. Today, he would say, wait, what is wrong with you? Didn't you learn anything? What are you thinking? What is wrong with you? Where is the sense that I gave you? Because the answer to the problem, this tendency, this bent to allow circumstances to take our focus, the answer is right there in the scripture. Do you not understand? He was instructing them to remember what had just happened. Because see, there's another cycle. There's another cycle that we have. Let's get rid of that cycle. I don't like that one. There's another cycle that we can go through. And this is the cycle of hope. Cycle of hope. And see, this cycle starts with a focus on Christ. A focus on Christ instead of our circumstances. And so when we focus on Christ, and we have him first and foremost, not our problem, not our circumstance, not our situation, that then leads to us living in his promises. You know, Scripture is full of promises from Christ, promises from God, things that he will be faithful to us, things that show his love and his care and his grace. And so we live with his promises, and I'll even go further for the disciples. his promises and recent, I'll put miracles for the disciples, but for us, what I want us to understand is the recent answered prayers. The recent job opportunities that we never thought we were going to get. The recent influx in our financial stability that all we did was pray for it, and God said, you know what, this is recent healings of illness. And once we begin to live in those promises, remember those miracles, remember those answered prayers, then the cycle continues. And we have faith. This is a hard one. I'm going to be honest. We have faith that Christ will do what's best. Christ will do what's best. Christ won't do what I want. Christ won't do what Mark wants. Christ will do what is best for the glory of the kingdom. See, we've got to remember in our mindset that this is about kingdom work. This is about glorifying the kingdom. It's about glorifying God. And so we have this faith that Christ will do the best for the glorification of the kingdom and for the glorification of God. And then anyone who's experienced this before, this creates such excitement and such awe that what happens? Yes, it goes in a circle. We begin to focus more on Christ. And if we get stuck in this cycle of hope, it's okay. It's okay, because this cycle of hope is going to keep all our focus on Christ so much that it could potentially be days, weeks, months, or years before you realize that you haven't been thinking about your circumstance. You've been thinking about Christ, and the blessings have just continued to come. The answered prayers have just continued to come. The illnesses have continued to fall away. Friends and family members that told you that getting involved in a relationship with Jesus Christ and finding a church to go to were the worst thing that could ever happen to you are now going to be attending with you. And you're going to look back and you're going to realize, hey, this circumstance could have torn me apart. I have friends that get stuck in that cycle of destruction. I'm not even going to show it to you because I don't want you to remember it. I have friends that get stuck in that cycle of destruction. And they say, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't have a clue. What am I going to do? This is what we do. This is what we need to do. We need to focus on Christ no matter what. It is imperative that we stay focused on Jesus instead of focused on our circumstances. So I want to challenge you. I want to challenge you today. Challenge you in the next couple of days, and I'm not trying to be defeatist here. Something is going to happen, because it always does. Something always happens. I want to challenge you in the next couple of days, in the next week, that when something arises in our life, when we get a circumstance or a situation that comes up, something that tries to take all of our attention, something that tries to take all of our focus away from anything else, the challenge to you is, when this happens, focus on Jesus. Think about the miracles, the answered prayers, the situations that have been taken care of, the relationships that you've built. Think of his works of faithfulness. And let's see if we can keep Christ our focus during these times to keep us from that cycle of destruction.
Thank you, Pastor Wade, for that message. As we wrap up, take a few minutes and let's just everyone close their